myself, got started working on some clinical trials, which I neglected to mention. Another disease I started working on is Huntington's disease, which is a movement disorder, but it also has very prominent cognitive and psychiatric symptoms, and that is what we're trying to better understand is what the presentation of those symptoms are. And I'm involved in a very large worldwide study that's headquartered here at the university, where we were studying people before they develop symptoms of Huntington's disease. And actually, interestingly, Huntington's disease was one of the first things I started studying or reading about when I got interested in genetics and molecular biology. And now I feel like I've kind of come full circle and started to work on that disease myself, because it is a genetic disease. And it was one of the first diseases where the actual gene defect was identified. It's been about 15 years since the mutation that causes Huntington's was specifically identified. And so while we know that what the end result is of the severe symptoms, we don't really know what happens to people prior to. We don't know a lot about what happens to people prior to the onset of some of the more prominent motor symptoms. And so that's what this study I'm involved in is working on, is to enroll people that we know have the gene mutation for Huntington's, but they don't have any symptoms yet. And so we're prospectively following those people over several years and getting a lot of data and trying to understand what some of the symptoms are. And ultimately, we want to develop better treatments that can actually prevent the symptoms from developing. And certainly that kind of work is also our ultimate goal in the other research I've done as well, in schizophrenia and autism too. And so a lot of variety, being able to work on all those different projects. And then also I do clinical work as well too. So I'm an inpatient staff physician at the hospital. I work on one of the inpatient psychiatry units. We do that 3 months every year, month at a time. And so I see patients, of course, while I'm there, and work with residents and medical students. And try to keep research going during that time too.
Are you 100 or full-time in the month?
Oh, not quite.
Quite.
It's considered full-time, I guess.
I
I have 25% clinical work, and so it's my 3 months of clinical time. The way that the days go then for me is I go to the unit in the morning, going around, see the patients in the morning. I usually have a chance to leave the unit for a little bit of time during the day, try to catch up on some things then. And then most days I'll go back to the unit and see new patients, meet with the residents and the students. So it's a little, of course, a little bit different during those times. And one thing that former director of the MSTP, Gary Koretsky, no longer here, had talked about when I was in training is that again, and this goes back to this whole idea of having opportunities, is that you have a lot of different things you can do during your career. You can spend your time focusing on one thing, more on one thing or another during your career as a physician scientist. And so and I've already certainly experienced that already, where you're making transition from getting the clinical training to research training, back to clinical training, and then working on combining those right now. Right now I'm trying to focus more on the research aspect of it. I try to get my own independent research program going, and trying to work on getting projects going and writing papers and applying for research grants. So there's actually still a lot that I have left to learn as well, even at this stage. But also for me, that's the thing that I really enjoy about what I'm doing, is just the great opportunities to learn all the time from not just people above me, but also people that I work with, or doing work for me, or working with me on projects. So it's constantly learning something new about how to do things, or understand something the ultimate goal of helping our patients.
You said your PhD's in Baker's yeast,
Mm-hmm.
and you're working now on Huntington's and schizophrenia and stuff. So that seems a bit of a stretch.
Mm-hmm.
But so what did that train you? Your PhD train you to do, or why?
Yeah,
Was that not wasted years?
Right. That's a very good question. And the answer, and someone else had already given this acronym now, of course, and one thing during your training is you get to meet a lot of different people. The MSTP brings in people from around the country to join. And of course, the university does all the departments that you are part of, that you interact with on campus. We'll bring in people from all over to talk about science, and not just their science, but also the process of becoming a scientist and giving you some advice for that. And I know advice people have given over the years that I've heard, and I've heard this from more than one person, is that you know, whatever research training you do get, say for your PhD, it really not you don't necessarily have to stay in that particular area, and it provides a background for you, and really not just the techniques that you learn in that training, but also a way of thinking. And definitely the things I learned as a graduate student has definitely been applicable to whatever research area I'm working on today. Well, certainly the methods are definitely very different, but that's even if you stay in the same field, the methods are going to change, and that's another aspect of the work that's fascinating, is the constant change and new things that are coming out. And certainly one of the big things in research today, not just genetics, but in general, is doing large-scale projects and generating a lot of data, especially using microarray technology, where a little glass slide has millions of little pieces of DNA on them. You can hybridize to your sample to it and get information about your sample you're trying to study, and then large numbers of samples, and then analyzing that data. When I was in graduate school, the first work on that was being done by people actually in yeast, and the work that they did in yeast has definitely now moved on, transitioned to all areas of not just science and medicine too, and now able to make I think a lot of progress in understanding basic biology, mechanisms of disease, developing new treatments, and it's a lot of information now that we would never have been able to access previously, and that's even true in the genetics field. There's genetic variation that every single one of us has that we didn't really appreciate until just a few years ago, and it's really thanks to this microarray technology that's allowed us to identify these small duplications and deletions that we all have in our own DNA. And most of us, it probably contributes to our own differences and how we're different from each other, but there's definitely cases where these changes that we hadn't been able to identify before are risk factors for disease, especially for psychiatric illnesses. A lot of work looking at schizophrenia and autism, and where in the past we kind of threw up our hands and said, oh, we don't really know what maybe the cause of some of these conditions. There are even other genetic disorders too. We're finding that there's some of these small genetic changes that are important contributors to that we just didn't have the understanding of before. So, talk about a lot of different things.
I think I hear that a lot as well, having been at this for a while, is that PhD is really training you to know how to think. It really isn't training you to be a Baker's yeast biologist or a biologist of trypanosomes or something. It's training you to think so that you can think independently, as a scientist independently, and you can come up with questions to answer independently, and that is what the value that the PhD behind your name literally brings to you, so that when you're competing, for instance, at the residency level or faculty level, with those who may have had science experience experience in the scientific community, but they haven't had the rigors of the PhD, and so